So I'm going to go ahead and do quick introductions. This is our end-to-end versus add-on analytics panel. With us, we have Hamish Dobson from Avigilon, Rashid Khan from Calypsa, Joe Weiss with Cisco Meraki, Florian Matisek, Genetec, and Kevin Marier at Milestone. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you everybody for joining. I am back, Ryan, so thank you for the quick intro.
You are welcome.
And I think we'll just start off with just a quick introduction for everybody, just so people know who you are at your specific company. I guess, Florian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Florian. I'm with Genetec, and I'm the product group director for video analytics at Genetec.
Okay, and Kevin?
Yep, Kevin Marier, Vice President of Technology Partners for Milestone, working with the more than 3,000 technology partners, including more than 100 analytic partners.
Okay, and Amish?
Yeah, Hamish Dobson. I lead product management for the video business at Motorola Solutions, which of course includes Avigilon.
Okay, Rashid?
Rashid Khan, co-founder and CEO of Calypsa. We develop a cloud-based analytics platform.
Okay, and last but not least, Joe.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Joe Weiss. I lead our smart camera and sensor portfolio at Cisco.
Okay, very good. And just bear with me for one more second here so I can pull up my questions and notes, scrambling a little bit from just finishing my presentation to make sure we're all set for this panel. So just a quick reminder to everybody, get those questions in chat. Again, we have some, and I'll say it, some really important people on this panel. So ask your questions. This is your chance. You know, difficult questions, good discussion. We have an hour, but you know, I have probably, I mean, I never have a hard time coming up with enough questions or talking for long enough, but you know, looking at my paper, probably only have about 45 minutes. So, you know, if we can get 15 minutes of discussion out of our members that are online right now, then that would be really good. So the first thing I want to start off with, probably one of the, I don't say the most challenging, but we run a lot of surveys that look at open versus end-to-end architecture, and we've certainly seen the preference from our subscribers that are integrators for that end-to-end system versus open. And you know, a lot of the things they cite are pretty common, and there's some common themes in terms of troubleshooting and pointing fingers versus end-to-end. It's that, you know, they use the phrase, you know, single throat to choke, which I think is probably ready to get rid of that phrase altogether. But when we look at, and I'll start with you, Amish, from that end-to-end focus in looking at, you know, Avigilon, not even just Avigilon specifically, but obviously that's who you can speak to specifically. We see some integrators, and I'll give everybody a chance to respond to this. We see some integrators that will say, there's a pretty good chunk of them that say, well, we're going to do open for some customers, and we're going to do end-to-end for other customers. And they sort of delineate that, well, we have one subset of customers that we'll do open with, and another subset that we're going to do end-to-end. Because most integrators, you know, they're not going to sell just a single platform or a single solution. What do you think, just from that standpoint, what do you think is the risk to integrators that are doing this? You know, or why, you know, why is this maybe the wrong approach versus just going with an end-to-end solution, you know, across the board?
Well, you know, to the question about, you know, which is the right approach, you know, I think ultimately we're going to see that both end-to-end and sort of custom continue to exist to some degree in the future. And I think that there's two clear characteristics there. A native integration of analytics functionality into the VMS is going to deliver a more seamless user experience. You can embed these functionalities into the workflows that exist. You can provide very seamless access to the timeline and all the other timeline functionality that might exist. For example, if you want to dig deeper after a forensic search, an AI-powered forensic search. But the fact of the matter is that you know, the use cases for analytics are about as broad as the industries that the video security market serves. You know, as a result, I think there will be some very vertical specific applications for analytics that may not make sense to be embedded into every version of a particular VMS, in the interest of trying to keep the functionality in a VMS somewhat broad and general purpose. In which case, I think there we'll see a home for vertical specific add-on functionality to some degree or another.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess Kevin, I'll go to you next in terms of that. You know, what is that risk of, you know, basically sort of playing both sides of the coin in that case? You know, what are the biggest challenges for integrators, you know, looking at I'm going to use this for some customers and I'm only going to be open in this subset of customers?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And just to go back to that question of what the risk is to the integrators with an end-to-end or an open platform. The risk we coin is you have, with an open platform, we keep you out of proprietary jail. With an end-to-end solution, you risk being locked out of the customer opportunity because too much of the value proposition swings to the manufacturer. And if the relationship between the manufacturer and the service provider deteriorates, the service provider can switch out, or the manufacturer can switch out the service provider. And so the risk of having a full end-to-end solution is that you become overly dependent on the manufacturer and too much leverage goes that direction. And you risk being locked out of the end customer. So we think that a balanced approach where you have a technology infrastructure that is made up of the different open and best breed technologies is going to give the systems integrator the highest value proposition to the customer.
Okay. And Joel, I'll give you a chance to obviously address that and even sort of respond. I mean, certainly coming from Cisco Meraki, not only is the video application, you know, very specific to a Cisco Meraki solution, but the whole Cisco infrastructure is obviously, you know, a closed architecture. Can you talk about, you know, that risk and where, you know, where Kevin says integrators and dealers can become overly dependent on the manufacturer and you know, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, you know, the first thing is we don't sell anything direct to any business or customer. We're channel only at Cisco, and we have been for 30 years. If we were swapping our partners in and out, well, they wouldn't be our partners for very long. And I like to say that Cisco probably has the healthiest partner ecosystem of any manufacturer producing technology today. And we continue to expand and grow that. So, you know, the likelihood of us taking out a partner, it's just not going to happen. They are our partners for a reason. And as long as we continue to deliver what they expect and they continue to deliver for the customer, everything continues to be great. In regards to like an end-to-end solution versus completely open, everyone is probably well aware at Meraki, we provide an exceptional end-to-end experience for every one of our customers. Just like Apple provides to their customers, when you have that closed ecosystem, well, you can ensure it's secure. You can ensure that you can deliver features at scale. You can update and manage simply and easily anywhere. And that's why customers have continued to choose Cisco Meraki technology.
But what if those customers want a multi-imager camera?
Sure. So if a customer wants a multi-imager, we don't have that on the truck today. We're always upfront with our customers. If they want to live in two different worlds for two different purposes, they can. we're very transparent when we're talking to customers about the products we build, the industries we serve, the businesses we help, and what our system offers out of the box without any complexity. And I think it's really important. We don't narrow down and say, well, this is right for you or this isn't. If a customer wants to use Milestone like they're using today, they can take the video out of the Meraki platform and connect it into Milestone. It's fine. We have RTSP out of our cameras. Customer owns their video. I had a customer today, in fact, I was chatting with just about this. They want to deliver the video platform into Milestone because that's where physical security manages their video. But ultimately, they love the ease and simplicity of being able to plug a Meraki camera in and it working anywhere, whether they're on a 3G, 4G, or 5G or fixed line network. So I think that there's a world where you can have both, an end-to-end solution that delivers incredible value, and more importantly, still take that video out into a third-party system if you need to.
And so potentially, you're almost talking about there's more risk from a Cisco Meraki standpoint in that you are potentially forcing them to kind of make that choice in some environments where this customer, I can do end-to-end Meraki because I have the offerings that I need for this one. But in this, if I have more complexity or need more things, then maybe I have to use, Meraki. But at some point I may decide, is it not fair that, well, then why am I using Meraki here? I'll just use, a different brand that has the full line of cameras. Do you think that's fair to say that there is some risk on Meraki having that type of sort of view where, well, if you want those cameras, you're just going to have to use a different camera?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're still building our camera platform. We just launched our first 4K bullet camera a few months ago. So whilst we can't make everyone happy all the time, customers have seen the innovation that continues to come out of what we're doing and are, joining and buying Meraki at length. Is there risk for us in them looking at other solutions along the way? Of course. We let them down and we're not upholding our end of the bargain and we're not delivering them incredible value in what they've already bought and continue to buy. Well, they'll churn and they'll leave us. And so the onus is on us to continue to show incredible value in what we do, or else there is lots of options for customers to go elsewhere and look at other products and other solutions. But the reality is you can't make every camera in the world. We can't make thermal and multi-image, as well as everything we're doing today. We just don't have unlimited resources. And so we have to place our bets in the meat of the market and focus on where the bulk of the opportunity is and what customers are looking for today while we build more niche products for the future.
Did the person from Cisco just say you didn't have unlimited resources? Come on, man.
I mean, we're just one small technology company trying to change the world.
Cisco can't cry poor, man. Come on, you're Cisco. So moving past that, so I'll move over to you, Florian. I mean, kind of related to that, but when we see, I started talking about like some of our surveys where we see the open architecture preference decreasing from integrators over the last 5 or 6 years. Why do you think that is the case?
So I think usually when we talk about open architecture versus end-to-end, what we mean is open architecture meaning complexity versus end-to-end meaning simplicity. And I believe that might be the reason that integrators or customers are looking for a system that is easy to deploy, easy to use, just simpler. But I do not believe that this is an either-or situation. I think there is a solution where you can provide an open architecture system that is not complex to deploy, it's not complex to maintain and not complex to set up, while still having this open approach. And what we also believe, we have very strong proponents to the open architecture approach, but at the same time, we also are very proud of our unified solutions. So on the video analytics side, what we're doing is we're actually providing unified analytics that are in the platform, that are easier to set up for the most common use cases. But on the other hand, we're growing our ecosystem with our tech partners, which is the open approach. So we try to bring simplicity there, as well as the breadth of an open architecture of being able to choose different kinds of functionality that customers might need.
And what would you say has been the biggest barriers or challenges, even if you could highlight one, where it hasn't been easier, and what has been causing more integrators or dealers to say end to end is easier, and why hasn't then been able to be delivered in open architecture in 2020, 2021, 2022?
Well, I believe in certain kinds of aspects take a lot of effort to make them very, very easy and simple. And one example is just the way you set up cameras in the VMS. If it's not coming from the same vendor, of course, there are additional steps. You have to choose the vendor in your VMS. You have to configure it. So there's a little bit more complexity there. So I believe maybe that's why they're going there. But I believe it's an initial step. So similar to when Apple brought out the iPhone. In the beginning, it didn't have an app store, just was the closed ecosystem of the iPhone. And later they brought the app store there as well, where you could choose to add more functionality. And I think we're in a similar transition right now where it goes towards more simplicity and ease of use, while still trying to maintain all the kinds of features that we have out there. And I think this kind of market will grow together, where you will have systems that are easier to set up while still having all the kinds of features that customers want.
And could you point at one specific aspect of why that hasn't happened already?
Well, I would say this the camera and VMS setup example is quite a good one, since if the VMS manufacturer is not the same as the camera manufacturer, because the VMS manufacturer wants to provide an open platform, of course he has to provide all the different kinds of way of configuring cameras.
Right.
So I think this is definitely a way why this hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
I think, Sean, there's another point that I think you're saying, why hasn't this happened in 22 or 23? I think there's a key point that we're missing here, is the life cycle between the cameras, the recording technology, the video, the network infrastructure, the cable infrastructure. These all have different life cycles. So they go through refreshes at different times. They don't all go in and get all refreshed at the exact same time. And so it's not a question of, can I snap a finger and I'm going to forklift the whole thing to one end-to-end solution? That's not practical. What end customers are dealing with is they have layers of infrastructure that have various life cycles that they need to update and maintain over time. And certain windows open up where they may be able to consolidate or shift vendors, but they have an install base, an infrastructure that's in place. And it's difficult when you build on top of that infrastructure to just quickly forklift that infrastructure to something else.
Right.
That's why there are opportunities for a Cisco Meraki to come in and to take a niche, using your words, Joe, not mine, to niche into specific use cases for customers, because that was the window of opportunity to replace that part of the customer's infrastructure. But if you look at the larger, more mature installations, boy, changing those things, there's some pretty big considerations, especially when the operations are depending on that technology. And you're going to see a very different set of adoption cycles happening. And then it's not going to happen overnight. And I would argue it probably isn't going to happen at all at scale. It may happen in certain niches, and there may be some conveniences for friction, but the innovation that we need to address, the fragmented end customer market, is too great for any one customer to address. You have to have an innovative ecosystem in order to fit your core product into all of the various niches that customers have.
Right. And related to that, going to you, Rashid, being that you guys offer, an add-on analytic capability, as opposed to sort of some fuller ecosystem, companies that we have on, where's the biggest risk or that biggest challenge for a startup like Calypsa to say, we're going to remain, like an add-on plug-in sort of, additional feature that somebody's going to have versus, Calypsa, we're just going to develop our own VMS and we're going to start selling our own cameras, and people want end-to-end, fine, we'll give you end-to-end. Where do you guys sort of balance those risks and challenges as you're building a company in 2022 at this point?
So great question, Sean, and I'm going to answer that in two parts. Number one is, as a startup, you have to look at the opportunity, and And how we assess the opportunity is there are over 1 billion security cameras, and echoing what Kevin said, those cameras were installed over decades and decades. And the refresh cycle for those cameras will also be decades, which means there are cameras out there where customers still need cutting edge AI, but they do not have millions and millions of dollars lying around to go and replace those cameras. And that's how we decided that there is a potential to build a really valuable business here. And number two, being a startup, you have access to limited amount of capital. I think you have to choose your battles wisely. We did not have the expertise to build a camera and a VMS and analytics at the same time. We decided that our expertise is in AI, is in building cloud software, and that's why we focused on that, and that's been, I would say, the main reason for our success so far. So yeah, I hope I addressed the points.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what do you think? Do you look at, certainly the company would probably, would present it or spin it one way as, that's the opportunity, is that we're really focused in this one area. But what have been maybe some of the bigger challenges you guys have faced where, you're going up against an Avigilon or some sort of end-to-end Verkada, a Meraki, where you're relying on so many other different moving pieces? What's that biggest challenge or risk that you've come to at this point where it has maybe made you pause and say, we're not going to do cameras, but man, we really need a VMS? Like, where are you guys in sort of looking at some of those challenges?
Yeah, sure. So to be honest, we've never really come against a company looking for a VMS or a camera solution, because those guys typically have very different budgets. So that's a qualifying question we are able to answer upfront, right? If someone is looking for an intelligence solution and they have a lot of money to spend, they probably will be looking at the likes of Verkada, Avigilon, or others. We typically play in markets where a customer has thousands of cameras and they have some money to spend, and they're typically looking at the cost of hiring additional people versus looking to buy an add-on analytics. And that's typically where we play. The biggest challenges for us have been the number of use cases that people are asking for. And as a result, as a company, we are trying to expand the number of problems we can solve for them to remain relevant and to grow our addressable market. But as far as our next 12 to 18 months is concerned, we are not thinking about building a VMS or a camera. It's all going to be adding more intelligence to the video that's already out there.
Okay. Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. And, I think it does lead into something, Amish, you mentioned earlier, sort of touch on maybe the vertical specific applications, that may be more challenging or maybe require, a look at an open architecture versus, it can be difficult to programmatically define really niche things into kind of like an end-to-end type of solution. But what are maybe some of the challenges or limitations that when you are an end-to-end manufacturer where you are trying to become or be everything to everyone or be everything to every customer? I mean, certainly, as you said, you can't do that, but ultimately that is the goal if you're an end-to-end provider in some level, in some respect. Certainly, a Motorola Solutions may not be concerned with, residential, video surveillance. That's not something they're getting into. But in the world of commercial, they want to have and be able to provide solutions, across the board. What is the biggest challenge in trying to be that everything to every customer, again, in quotes, to every customer, in sort of working in the market that way?
Well, maybe perhaps, contrary to
We want contrary.
public belief, we all live within resource constraints. whether it's Rashid in a startup or Cisco or ourselves at Motorola Solutions. And the application for artificial intelligence and analytics, I believe it has the potential to be the most disruptive force in physical security as a whole, and certainly video security. Since the transition from IP to analog, the space of problems that is available to solve as the technology evolves is huge, both in terms of the kinds of insights that we can deliver, the ability to turn the data inherent in this stored video into knowledge. And so when I look at the application spaces, advancing search, moving towards abilities for the operator to interface with our system with natural language queries, customizable dashboards, insights dashboards, etc. And that's not even getting into situational awareness type scenarios. Presents so much opportunity and work that we're not even talking about getting into custom analytics for example, airside protection in an airport, as an example. And so, for the foreseeable future, when I look at these spaces, I think that's where I see the need for companies like Avigilon to continue to offer SDKs that allow third-party niche analytics providers to integrate with our solution. And we do have quite a number of third-party partners in our technology partner program, and that's specifically for that reason, because we can't be everything to everybody, and I doubt we ever will be.
Right, and I think that that's certainly then from the, and because yes, we have Meraki certainly as a camera manufacturer, but when you look at the camera product line and sort of that potential where certainly I'm sure Motorola and Avigilon want every Avigilon camera to be connected to an Avigilon ACC system. How do you sort of approach the market where we see maybe not all the features and capabilities necessarily supported, most being supported, but not as broadly supported from an Avigilon camera compared to maybe an Axis or a Bosch or another manufacturer? How do you, maybe address those issues? Is it ONVIF M conformance from other manufacturers where, Avigilon, the hardware manufacturer, is maybe playing in a more open architecture world on the other side from a VMS standpoint?
Right. You mentioned ONVIF M, and I in particularly in the AI space and the analytics space, we have been waiting for the standards to catch up. There were a number of limitations when we had Profile T, that spoke to usability and ease of install. On VIF-M makes a big step in that direction, and I would anticipate that any VMS vendor, certainly ourselves, would look to support Profile M. Again, we can't support every vertical analytics niche, and we won't support every camera, not to mention all the installed cameras, but even just from niche applications for cameras. So our customers are going to be looking to us to support third-party cameras through Profile M.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and clearly we've seen in both our testing and in our reporting, Avigilon has historically taken a pretty strong backing or approach to ONVIF in both your devices and the VMS. So certainly no reason to question that. Shifting gears a little bit, Kevin, I'll go back to you. You know, and I sort of started this with, you know, talking to, you know, Florian and, you know, how do you overcome the integrator preference as it sort of moves to an end-to-end versus versus an open architecture? But is some of it, do you think, you know, somebody brought up the iPhone environment and the iOS environment previously, you know, where is some of this driven by just the modern consumer life where, you know, you have iOS and it works, all your Apple apps work really great, but then you have, you know, those handful of third-party apps, and they cause, you know, all sorts of headaches and problems despite being supported and certified and whatever through the iOS store. Do you think that that sort of impacts just naturally, you know, subconsciously even the modern user, where you have that new layer to overcome that maybe didn't exist 5 years ago, didn't exist 10 years ago, where people just don't want to deal with, you know, third party and open support? Do you think that that has any impact at all? Or, and if it does, like, do you think, you know, how do you overcome maybe some of those challenges and just overall, you know, issues that people deal with not even related to video surveillance?
Yeah. So first, I think the Apple comparison is a bad comparison.
Mhm.
Apple has almost zero market share comparatively to Android. So when you really look at the scale of
Mhm.
devices and units, Android is one and never will lose. When
Mhm.
you look at revenue share or the share of the wallet or the profit, certainly Apple makes no, you know, no question about they're going to take the most of the profit from that market. And that's the way they've chosen to operate, a very small unit scale, but a very high profit scale. Good business. I'm an Apple fan, but I don't think it's a relative
Yeah, I mean, even to even taking the Android, you know, using a Google app versus using a third-party email app, you know, do you think any of that sort of consumer experience impacts what people choose, you know, from a video?
I don't think it does at scale. But what I do think we should shift to in discussion around this industry and end-to-end versus add-ons is something that you've talked about, the technical integration. What I'm curious about is, in what we see as something that's important as the next step, is the business rules alignment. That we talk about friction of deployment, but we don't talk about friction of business rules. The business rules are, for the systems integrator, even a bigger challenge, because if they've got to send multiple invoices, if they've got to do all of these, let's say, extra steps in order to conduct a transaction, that can be seen as negative. It could also be seen as positive, that they're not stuck into a particular discount structure with an end-to-end provider that's controlling the margin. They can actually make additional margin by moving to a third party. So I think that there is an aspect of the money trail, the profitability, the viability of what you're offering comes into a key role here. But to scale, companies like Genetec, companies like Milestone, and companies like Avigilon, we've proven we can scale both revenue as well as unit scale. And from a Milestone standpoint, I think we've proven we can really scale device unit scale. And when we look at the technology partners, such as Eclipsa or others, we see the opportunity to help them align to the business rules that help take away the friction to be included in a solution. And there is an end-to-end community-based solution that can be provided. The business rules are one thing to deal with. The technology integration is another piece. But the realities is if we can enable the market to be able to put together solutions that fit customers' needs and reduce the friction to allow that to happen, I mean, that's a highly innovative market space and highly resilient and profitable.
And so, you know, you would generally say, even, you know, maybe not assigning a number or a percentage, but do you think that maybe those business rules are actually, you know, potentially the bigger challenge than even the technology aspect?
They're the biggest challenge, and then you'll see this in my presentation on Thursday with our discussions around Milestone and our approach to enablement as well as to providing add-on solutions. The business rules is number one. And if we want to get scale for companies like Calypso, we have to help them through the J curve. There is a serious constraint on their capitalization, and we need to get them to scale. And I believe the company, the core part of the infrastructure that can enable companies like Calypso to get through that curve faster wins. And there is an unlimited innovation capacity within our market today. Take NVIDIA as an example, and I'll talk about that in my presentation. They have a corporate incubation process with over 8,000 Calypsos. I mean, that's an incredible innovation stack that's happening at scale. And we need to look beyond our niche of an industry that we are into the broader enablement that's happening. End to end is not going to happen. There's too much innovation horsepower and too much capital behind companies like Calypso to let that be the case.
No, that I mean, you know, certainly I don't necessarily disagree on that. You know, end to end is never going to be obviously 100% market share or anything like that, but certainly there is a lot of capital behind Verkatas as well that are not only end to end but total lock-in.
It's easy to buy customers,
Right.
and there's money is cheap. You can definitely do that. But if you look at Meraki was an acquired company, Avigilon was an acquired company, Milestone's an acquired company. There is a consolidation and aggregation happening at the core infrastructure, and that is happening because size matters. When you're trying to scale out to the market, size matters. The independents are at risk of being too small.
Right.
When you start growing and to scale geographically and horizontally or vertically, you need capitalization, you need intellectual property, you need a freedom to operate. And you know, one of the challenges that the startups market have that Avigilon, or I should say not Avigilon, but companies like NVIDIA are doing that are different than Object Video is they're trying to create this freedom to operate, a freedom to innovate. And that's why you're going to see openness at the IP layer to happen so that it gives freedom to operate for companies to invest capital, to grow, and to solve problems, because we need this freedom to operate within the market.
Yeah, I mean, Rashid, can you sort of talk about that in terms of, you know, when you're going to market, when you're trying to, you know, sell your solution, sell your wares to the marketplace, do you generally agree that the business side of things is you know, significantly or much more of a challenge than maybe that technology integration? But you know, just with your guys' focus in the central monitoring space, like finding your space in that their business process is more of a challenge, and maybe even just integrating to the PSIM platform that they use for monitoring.
Yeah, I would say so, because only when you overcome the business challenges can you really show what your product does. So typically you need to get through that process of Excel files, presentations, Word documents before you can talk product and technology. And we find that to be the case with some of the larger customers. For example, we spoke to some large customers and they said it will take us 6 months to review the business processes to see if a small company like Calypso can do business with us. Whereas with a smaller company, that process can be done in 7 days. And then we can start doing a demo and a trial and demonstrate what the product does. But having said that, from that point onwards, then the technology integration comes in, right? So we spend a lot of time making sure our product integrates with whatever system the customer has. So whether that be the camera manufacturers, the VMS providers, any other system that they want us to integrate with. So it's a combination of both things. We think some manufacturers make it easy to integrate with their products. Others make it harder, but that's up to us to figure that out and give a one-touch experience to the customer.
So sort of ignoring the technology aspect, what other than like customer size or company size, what can be done to overcome those business challenges a little bit easier? What can the marketplace maybe do to, you know, make those business challenges less of a problem?
Well,
Got to make it easier.
Yeah, I wish there was one standard where let's say like in software engineering, for example, there are some companies who will offer an assessment, a standard assessment, or like you go to a university, there's a GPA score. So if you have a GPA score of 4, everyone knows, okay, this person must be good. I wish there was a unified standard where every vendor could take that assessment, and then we go to a company, and I can go to an ExxonMobil, or I can go to a local cafe, and they can look at this assessment, and that simplifies that business decision-making process. That would be an ideal scenario, but I don't know if that can happen.
Like eyelids did in the early days, right? A certification for video analytics.
Right. So you're saying, Florian, some sort of standard. Could you just repeat that?
Well, that's what I understood from Rashid, that he's referring to kind of a standard or a certification around video analytics, and that's essentially what eyelids tried in the early days, and unfortunately somehow didn't go so far. Today it's CPNI, but I agree as well, because we have this large group of startups with great innovation out there, as Kevin mentioned, and it's really hard for end users to figure out what is a good solution, what is not a good solution. So going there towards a standard would certainly help with end users to find the confidence to try startups and try something new.
We found at Cisco, we have a really healthy startup ecosystem that builds solutions on top of our Meraki smart cameras. They take the analytics, some of the intelligence, and the telemetry off the cameras, and they deliver tons of value on top of what we do. Because we're not going to build specific features for construction or healthcare, but they will. And to echo Kevin's point, the hardest thing for them to be able to do is just get in front of that end user, to be able to have a brand like Cisco or Milestone stand behind them and say, actually, we vetted this startup, we've worked with them, they've delivered value for other customers. You should take a look at them as part of the solution you're looking at. And it's something that we are continually investing in and working very, very hard at Cisco, and building that developer ecosystem with thousands of developers certified on our platform. But it's more important that we're bringing them to bring their unique opportunities to the computer vision space. Just like NVIDIA with thousands of incubated startups, we're in the same boat at Cisco. We know our brand opens doors for our startup and our startup community, and the onus is on us to be able to incubate and help them solve the problems that we see coming in the future. And it makes a massive difference being partnered with Genetec and Avigilon, a Milestone, when you're trying to provide credibility to a Calypso.
And I think one of the key things that, Joe, you're also mentioning is that you leave enough value on the table for them to grow a business. The external value creation has to be there. You can't take it all. If you take the whole pie, if you take the whole wallet, there's nothing left for anybody else. And in the end, there'll be no motivation for people to help you. We have to look at the scale and the opportunities within our market. There is no single provider that can make this. Amazon or AWS for that way, Azure or Google or Oracle or Alibaba, they're going to get a cut of the entire market eventually. And we can call them the next level of distribution, but they're going to get a rake off of everything we deliver on their infrastructure.
Right.
And so it's another example. The technology stack is not fixed to a brand. It should be fixed to solve a problem that the customer deems is important.
Stop trying to bring everybody together, Kevin. Come on. Joe, related to what you mentioned about those plugins, that was the one of the last questions I had. So a lot of manufacturers from a camera side have offered sort of these app infrastructure, app plugins, et cetera, that, can take, those third-party applications, throw them out at the edge, maybe a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more flexibility than deploying, big servers or even having to utilize the cloud. But how does Cisco balance that support for third-party apps versus functions and features that should be core? And how do you also manage, sort of as a second part, that risk from those app developers to say, well, do I really want to develop this for Cisco? Because they're gonna see it successful in 18 months, and then they're just gonna, come up with their own and pay to do their own once we are the proof of concept that you can sell fire detection or, some niche application. How do you, sort of have those conversations and deal with that risk for that add-on developer like a Calypsa? Why should Calypsa potentially develop this really good analytic plugin for your cameras if you're just gonna throw $10 million to Calypsa? Might be a lot of money. $10 million to Cisco is nothing, and you could just say, we developed it, haha. Now we have that solution. How do you deal with that from a both business and a technology standpoint?
Well, let's first start by stating the fact that customers' expectations have continued to change and evolve. If you look at what you get out of a Nest camera, a Ring doorbell, take your pick of consumer grade hardware and solutions. Professionals have those in their homes. My CIOs I work with, CTOs, they've got these cameras and devices and they're using them on their mobile app every day. And so their expectations of what should be core to a camera product are changing, because they're using and engaging with consumer grade products every single day. Beyond that, we will build functionality that is core to our product. Core to our product is identifying people and vehicles, tracking them across space, and continuing to make improvements to that. Eventually, cross-camera tracking in an edge-based way may make sense to come to the platform. And the real unique value is all of the data that comes off the cameras comes out in an MQTT telemetry feed. So you get the object detection and recognition, and that's where our third-party ecosystem providers are leveraging both the inbuilt detection and analytics that we deliver in the camera, and then taking the inference data and the video at the same time and delivering more functionality for customers who have specific needs and outcomes. We don't have things like face mask detection built into our camera platform, but when a customer needed it, they worked with one of our ecosystem partners, Every Angle. They delivered edge-based person detection and then inference information that pulled back face mask detection in the cloud. So they just deployed cameras and they used edge and cloud and delivered that outcome without servers, without banks of storage, without touching their physical security infrastructure. This was tens of thousands of cameras they deployed at a large healthcare institution. And so when you start to think about how do you keep your ecosystem of developers happy? How do you make sure they don't leave you or feel like you've taken their value? You include them in your planning. You have roundtable engagement sessions and you talk about them and you're upfront about what you're building in the strategic direction of the product so that they can solve the problems that the end users are bringing to you, because that's where the value is for our end users. We know that we're never going to have everything for everyone all the time, and we're not even going to come close. But what we will have is a simple and easy to deploy platform that offers scalability and reliability, and it gives you the inference data you need to be able to make those informed decisions. And our ecosystem continues to grow and flourish.
And do you think there's any chance, certainly I think there's an opportunity in terms of all these disparate, so what we're seeing now is everybody's trying to build an app store. Cisco's got an app store, Bosch has an app store, Axis has an app store, Milestone has an app store. You go down the list and everybody's got some sort of app store marketplace, however you want to, a Xena, a whole infrastructure, Android OS based camera solution for app stores. Ultimately, now you're still in that environment of, well, I developed an app for Android and it ain't going to work on iPhone. So now I have to either decide or I have to spend all these extra resources to figure out which, if I can be on all the platforms with things like OnVIF that have this framework in place for some analytics and some support and, adoption without plugins. Is there a chance, an opportunity? Is this just completely crazy thinking that there shouldn't be a way to allow a more open, generic support, given that we have a framework like OnVIF that exists? How does Cisco maybe have those conversations with those app developers to say, hey, use the resources here. Don't worry about developing something for ACAP. Don't worry about developing a Milestone plugin, whatever, a Genetec plugin. How do you deal with that concern from the developer standpoint.
Yeah, most of our developers build exclusively for the Cisco Meraki platform because they see the tremendous value and scale that Cisco
Very
brings to the
selfish of
table.
Cisco. It's very, very selfish of Cisco.
I know. Well, you know, we're a manufacturer. We've been doing this for a really long time, and we make sure that our partners, our ecosystem partners, and our integration partners make healthy margins, and we're the place to develop technology. You asked earlier
So you're
about-
not basically, you know, that support for some sort of open apps for all security applications isn't something that, you know, really you think has any sort of traction or idea that would make sense.
I mean, we continue to see it in stops and starts, but the challenge is if you're building your camera on an Android platform, which we are not,
right?
Then you cannot have, you know, we can't have an Android app store if you're not building on Android, right? And we see both pros and cons to building a camera with the Android operating system, but it's not for us. That's not what our customers are asking for. They come to us saying, I want a secure, simple to deploy, easy to manage camera that I can just stick out there, and I can put it alongside the rest of my trusted network devices, and it just works. And I don't have to think about the cybersecurity because it's Cisco and I know it's going to work. And that's what our customers continue to ask us for. If they came to us and said, we need an Android operating system and we need an app store across all of our cameras and we want you to be part of that, well, that's a different story. But I haven't had a single customer come to me asking for an Android app store for a camera.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Florian and Kevin, I'll sort of let you guys respond similarly to this question, even yourself, Amish, in terms of that. You know, we have ONVIF. A lot of surveillance manufacturers got together. We have this forum where we're going to create these different profiles and these frameworks to have more open support of, you know, camera configuration and access control devices and a broad spectrum of things in the security industry. You know, is there an opportunity to expand that, not just for camera connectivity and maybe for third-party developers like a Calypsa, a BriefCam, whoever it is, to have more of a continuity between what development is done for a Milestone and what's done for a Genetec and what's done for a Avigilon? Florian, I'll let you sort of start with that. And Kevin, I'm sure you have input, so.
So absolutely. I mean, we have been waiting for Profile M for a long time, and I believe it's a huge opportunity for our industry because for the first time we have a standard around video analytics on how data should look like. And I hope that it will really, really disseminate or spread in our industry, that all the VMSs and all systems will support Profile M, because in the end, it gives all the startups, all the Calypsas, the opportunity to be in the deals and to be tightly integrated, and they shouldn't have to do the work for each VMS separately. In the end, it's the end user that decides what they want and where the innovation is. So the end user should have the freedom of choice what kind of video analytics startup they choose, and they shouldn't be locked in by a VMS. So I believe Profile M is a huge opportunity, and I really hope it goes in this direction, that we really standardize everywhere around one common standard.
Right. Kevin?
I think there's certainly from an interface standpoint, ONVIF's doing great things to allow systems the possibility to talk in an expected way. But I think you're missing the point, and just back to what Joe was talking about. The problem's not at the interface level of communication. The problem that you were describing, Sean, and Joe was somewhat answering, is a recompile. We have an x86 Windows environment, and we have a Linux environment, which can be x86 or ARM. This is a compute and operating system layer challenge. And what companies like Azena are doing in collaboration with OSA, who I also sit in the OSA Alliance, are working on our common components that allow manufacturers to use within their systems. And the common component in this case is the SoC operating system combination that creates the trust that Joe's talking about, because you can secure it down to the SoC. And that is about to hit scale. Now, choosing Android versus Ubuntu or whatever other proprietary, technology being used, and by the way, it's not Android, it's Android open source project, So you end up with an open platform that you can innovate around. And I think you're going to see that is going to create an opportunity. You have companies like Zymos as an example that can multi-home or recompile their technology to work on one compute platform versus another, and it's not that difficult of a process. We just went through a proof of concept. We had a student worker in research recompiled from x86 to ARM and go from Windows to Ubuntu to Android, and it took less than a month to go through that process, one part-time employee. So it's not as big of a friction problem as you bring up. It's actually more of an opportunity. And I think the Calypsos and the Zymoses and all the other companies that are building in this space, they're looking at ACAP, they're looking at Meraki, they're looking at Hikvision and Dawa and Milestone and Azina. They're looking at these as great opportunities for them to reduce their deployment friction, add a money-making logic, which is quite valuable for them, to be able to bring transactions, trialing, software. This is the alignment of the business rules that I was referring to. When you can have one way to know that the money is clean, the payment processing happens, it's in 40 or 50 countries, it's easy as a credit card swipe, and the EULAs are aligned and the terms of use are aligned. Those are real business rules that really help companies scale.
Hamish, do you have any input or feedback in terms of either the business aspect, the standardizing, analytics support, et cetera?
Yeah, we've talked through this conversation in about two different domains in which an ecosystem might exist. One, in Kevin just mentioned OSA, at the edge, and an app store at the camera level, and then the plugins to the VMS in a centralized location. I strongly, and Avigilon obviously strongly believes that hybrid approaches to analytics are the most efficient approach. You're going to see the heavy lifting done at the edge in terms of object detection and classification, and then a lot of the real innovation existing in analytics use cases existing at system-wide use cases. So, for example, search. Nobody's really interested in searching on a single camera. We want to be able to search and do forensic activities at the system level, and that all needs to exist in the core. And I think what we're seeing is the analytics at the edge on the camera is with things like Profile M is standardizing to the point that the domain of innovation and the domain where the ecosystem is going to be strongest is server side and in the cloud, one or the other depending on the nature of the system. And so really I think interfaces, SDKs that allows ecosystems to participate in those areas of a system are where we're putting our attention.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody. We've got a couple minutes left, but no more real questions are coming in, and we're going to shift over to our next presentations anyway. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen, for connecting and for the conversation. Definitely appreciate it from everyone. So yeah, thank you. And we'll move on to our next shortly. We'll probably take a couple minute break. Thank you.
Sean.
Thanks,
All right.
Sean.
Bye.
Kevin.
Thanks, Sean.
Rashid, Joe, Florian.
And nice to meet you all. Thank you.
You too. All right.